here's your host, Alex Garret.
All right, well, on my line right now is a very special guest reporting in live from the Mets Marlins series at Lone Depot Park in Miami. He's a longtime friend from the Queens College days. And Will Sammon, when I saw you were with The Athletic, I said, man, I remember when he was reporting at Night News. What a jump, what an evolution for you. And now we have you on my podcast as a reporter for The Athletic. Thanks for joining.
Hey Alex, good to talk to you. Been a long time, man. I appreciate that. It was not necessarily a direct jump from Queens College to the Athletic, but I'll certainly take it. It's been a fun road.
All right, well, you're on the team with the team. You're on the road with the team. So just tell us a little bit about covering the Mets for those that may want the behind the scenes, what you do with The Athletic. We report on your news all the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I've been covering the Mets since 2022. Before that, I was covering the Milwaukee Brewers. I jumped back to the Mets because, as you know, that's my hometown. I grew up in Queens, so it's been fun. I cover the Mets pretty much every day. I go on the road for a lot of road series, um, and I pretty much cover every home game. So I try to have the pulse of the team, try to have like what's going on as far as how the clubhouse feels, and in addition to just tracking the wins and losses and the ebbs and flows of the season, I also break down roster movement with trades or pickups, free agent signings, what have you, whatever the Mets decide to do. So there's been a busy month, I would say, with July
Yeah.
and the trade deadline picking up, even though there was the All Star break. But yeah, it gets a little bit busy this time of year.
Well, I know, and July 31st feels right around the corner. So let me ask you this firstly, though. Are we going to see a picture with you, or have you posted a picture with the OMG sign? I got to ask you that because that seems like the lifeblood of the clubhouse right now.
No, I did catch up with Jose Iglesias about writing the song about a month ago when it started to really percolate in the clubhouse and they started to play it after games after they won, and that was fun. And I had no idea that he would then play multiple concerts, like one after a Mets game and then one during the All Star break. So that's been fun. But kudos to him, man. It's been a long road for him as well to kind of get back to the major leagues and to have the impact that he's had on the Mets. It's pretty unprecedented for a guy who was on a minor league deal to have this sort of impact. Where he's a recorded artist, a Latin pop star, but oh, by the way, he's also batting like 400 for this team. So he's had a huge impact on the clubhouse and on the field.
All right. Now, I got to ask you this because, you and I got the chance to talk with Howie Rose in our Queens College days. I feel like you got to be around him a lot more now, right, as a reporter. What's it like interacting with him? His 50th year of radio, by the way.
Yeah, I have so much respect. I mean, obviously, I remember. I think it was a couple of times, but I remember at least one time where he came to Queens College and he spoke to us, and he probably won't remember it that as much as we do. I'm sure he does remember it, but he did spend some time with us both, you in particular, just because of the radio connection. But yeah, working like alongside him now, you really get to understand like why he has had such breadth in this industry and like his career has taken him everywhere. And there's been so many games under his belt. It's he's somebody that's always prepared. He's always looking at the game like through such a historical lens, but also just the perspective that he brings and like what questions he asks, what kind of thoughts go through his mind. It's always fun, like before games, to see like what's on his mind and like what he has for the manager to ask about and what's caught his attention. Because if it's caught his attention, chances are it's pretty interesting because he's been around the game for so long that if it struck a chord with him, you want to know why. And so like that's like an everyday occurrence, especially at City Field because he's not on the road as much as he used to be. But at City Field, like he's just always prepared. His broadcasts are always they remain strong. I feel like it's at the top of his game still, which is pretty crazy to say for somebody who's been doing this for so long. But yeah, I just have so much respect for him. Always have, obviously, when you grow up in New York. But working alongside him on a day to day basis, you really see like just how much he pours into it.
All right. Saying that announcer, man, you mentioned Milwaukee, and I just saw Bob Uecker celebrate 90 years of life. And I know that you probably interacted with him when you were covering the Brewers as well.
Yeah, that's a totally different personality. It's so different than everybody else you'll come across in baseball, but he's such a beloved character there. It's hard to really have somebody. who you feel like is that integral to the team. Because, like, yes, there's been some broadcasters, obviously, especially in baseball, that have been around for like decades and decades, but he is such a part of that team, though. Like, he is part of the clubhouse in a way that other people just aren't. Like, he is celebrated there, he's revered, but players still connect with him, and I think that's what's kept him in the game for so long, and that's what's kind of kept him like relevant and afloat. And also on top of his game is his ability to connect with people. He has like great relationships with like younger players like Freddie Peralta, who I still don't even think is like 30 years old yet. But that's one guy that comes to mind that I just know that he has a good rapport with, a good relationship with. And there's so many others that he's always talking to in that clubhouse. He's always trying to connect with. And so that's something that kind of goes a little bit under the radar when it comes to Bob Uecker, because like there's so many avenues you can go when that name comes up. But for me, like that's always what comes to mind is that he always connected with players, regardless of the age difference. And I think when you approach certain ages like him, that's not always easy, but that's what makes him unique.
All right. Well, a couple of things Mets related, and hopefully when we'll get out to Milwaukee at some point to see him before he goes. He signed my book of wit many years ago. Did Bob Uecker, so I got to know him a little bit. I'll tell you a funny story real quick. I was running the bases at Shea Stadium when I was really little. I remember I had long hair, and I said, "You ran great, young fellow," or something like that. And I said, "I'm a boy," because I thought he was telling me I was a girl. It was kind of funny, but I loved interacting with Bob Uecker back in the day. Now, the couple of things I want to ask you here is, did the All-Star snubs bother you? Was Nimmo, he deserved to be there? Did that bother you? Or do you think it's better for this team to focus on what they're doing on the field and not get wrapped up in who's going where?
I can see why it would bother like certain fans and like a segment of the fan base because like you see that those two guys were integral to the success now of the Mets season so far and the way that they've turned things around. And they've been key cogs of it. They've been leaders off the field as well, in addition to posting just really consistent numbers ever since, say, like around mid-May. But at the same time, Nimmo got off to a slower start due to just mainly being one of the most unluckiest players in baseball, I would say, because he was hitting a lot of balls hard. They just weren't falling for hits. And then Lindor, he got off to another slow start with a couple of poor weeks in April, and then by the end of April and even by the end of May, his numbers were just not looking that great. And even like when the voting opened for fans, like that was a time period when the Mets weren't playing well, and those two players in particular were not off to hot start. So I can see why they wouldn't have been voted in by the fans totally. But you did think toward the end, because the Mets needed somebody to represent them, that one of those guys would have been chosen. Turns out it was Pete Alonso. They needed some participants for the home run derby. He's always been somebody that has been heavily invested in that event. So that was no surprise. The only surprise really was neither Nimmo nor Lindor also was joining him. So it was definitely surprising. I wouldn't say it bothered me personally, just because I'm a little bit more detached than like the fans are, but I can totally see why the fans would be upset by it.
All right. Well, we wake up today and the Mets are really in the thick of this playoff race. When they had that closed door meeting, did you think the result would be about 17 wins out of the gate of that after that meeting and then some, right? So it's been quite a turnaround since that thrown glove into the stands and the closed door meeting that followed. That's a turning point, right? And I feel like that gets overlooked a little bit.
Yeah, though that is the turning point. I think you're probably right, because a lot of people focus on like all like the silly like shenanigans and like the characters, whether
It's
it's
the
like
grimace era. What
Grimace
am I
or
saying, right?
yeah, right, or Grimace or some dog or whatever it is, right? That's been the case here. That stuff is fun. Don't get me wrong; it's kind of cool, and you know, it's something different. It makes the Mets unique in that sense a little bit. But really, it comes down to just the players performing well, right? Like that's why they've won, and that did start to change after that meeting. And I give a lot of credit to Francisco Lindor for initiating it, and also for really, performing up to like what we expect of him, right? Because this was a guy who, like I said earlier, was struggling to start the year, but he really turned it on. And I think when you call a meeting like that, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. I mean, he's not going to say that, but you put a lot of pressure on yourself to perform because everybody's looking at you after that. Like you're the one who called this meeting, and you're saying that things need to change. And he wasn't the only one saying that, but you get my drift. where, you're a
Sure.
veteran player and, you're saying like, look, we got to step up here. Well, it starts with him, right? He's one of the highest paid players in the game at that position. And he is a leader on this team. So it starts with him. It starts with Brandon Nimmo. And those guys really stepped up. And I think also, JD Martinez had a really good role in that meeting as well, where, afterward, they took the pregame hitters meeting that all these teams have before games. I don't want to say they took it more seriously, but it seems like, and it sounds like from talking with them, that they're a lot more into it than maybe they were. And there's a lot more accountability in that regard, where like they're coming with an idea of, okay, like here's what I did right or here's what I did wrong yesterday and here's why. So I thought that was kind of refreshing, and I think that kind of when people talk about JD Martinez and the impact that he's had, that's also part of the conversation as well, with just the trickle down effect that he's had on some of the other players here.
I know I have you only for a couple more minutes. Thank you for your time today, Will, on the Alex Garret Podcast Network. But two big things. Can you assure Met fans and MLB alike that, Alonso's staying put, you're not hearing anything crazy for the deadline? And what would you like to see at the deadline for the Mets?
Yeah, I think with Pete Alonso, at this point, I would be surprised. I think a lot of people in the industry would if they were to trade him. It seems a little less likely of that happening than it did, say, like a month or even like 2 months ago when I actually asked Pete about it, because it did seem like, the Mets were, what, 10 games under 500 on a couple of instances. And you wouldn't have blamed the front office here if they just sold everybody that was able to fetch you a decent return. And, Pete Alonso is one of those guys. He's on an expiring contract, set to be a free agent at the end of the season. So that would have only made sense from a practical standpoint. But now, the Mets are in the thick of it. They're a team that should be competing for the playoffs. They're in it right now. There's a lot of season left still, but there's a lot to like about them.
And by the way, Cota Senga's coming back, right? What's the latest on him?
Yeah, he is coming back. He's scheduled to pitch for the Mets and return on Friday. So like things are turning around for this club in some good ways. And Pete Alonso is a huge part of that. So I don't really foresee that happening. A lot can change though. Like, there's still like what, 10 games left between now and the trade deadline. So, barring a collapse, I'd be surprised if he didn't stay put here. But yeah, Senga's back. He'll be back, I should say, on Friday against the Braves. That's a huge lift for them. He's their top starter. He's been out the whole season, so that should give them a lift. And then as far as like what they could do at the trade deadline, or what I'd like to see them do, and I think what fans would like to see them do, they need to just further address the bullpen at the very least. I'm not expecting like major moves here for them, but they need to fortify that group. They need to get a little bit stronger there for sure.
All right. And Carlos Mendoza, I never blamed him from the beginning of this because, it's his first year managing. And I think people who didn't blame him were right not to blame him because look at him. He's producing a winner here, first year managing the Mets.
Yeah, I like Carlos a lot. I think he's done a great job here with this team. And I know people harp on the fact he's a first year manager, and he is, but he is somebody that's been around the game for a long time at this point. You know him well from knowing the Yankees and him being the bench coach there. That's not a job where it's like, oh, he was just the bench coach of a team for a few years. Like, New York Yankees bench coach, that's a big deal. So that adds a little bit of cachet to his resume when you look at him. And so he's not just like your ordinary first year manager. This guy's been around for a while, and you could tell. And what I really like about him is like just the refreshing honesty, how direct he is. And you could see that that's how he is with his players as well. And so his players respect him for that. So for me, the biggest thing with Carlos Mendoza, the biggest strength that I've noticed is just his communication skills. I think they are really, really special. I think it's going to take him a long way. And it already has. I mean, like, you do not start the season 0-5 and then stumble and experience everything that the Mets experienced this year and then come out after the All-Star break and you're looking at seeing a few games over 500 without having some good leadership in place. And I think it starts with him.
And hopefully Brett Beatty gets called back up because I think if he gets his thing together, he would be a mighty force for this lineup. So we'll see what his progression is in the minors. All right. Well, you once wrote that I was on my game, always on my game at Queens College. I would say you're always on your game at the Athletic, and we got to have a longer conversation on an off day here. Looking forward to the Subway Series, I imagine.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Haven't been to the Bronx, of course, since last year. The games at Citi Field were pretty electric, I would say. And you expect nothing less. And these teams, they both have a lot at stake, so that makes it even even more exciting. Even though Luis Severino won't get his wish and pitch against the Yankees, I still think that there's a lot to the table here with two teams that these games matter a great deal in July.
It's gonna be fun, and it's the Alonso Judge, heated up matchup that we were all waiting for last year before they both got injured. So I'm excited to see this reconnect this week. So, Will, I know you'll be covering it for the Athletic, and come back on, maybe before September to hear what you're hearing about call-ups possibility for the Mets this year.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun, man.
All right, Will Sammon, the Athletic, and my buddy from college, Queens College alumni, connecting here. You're at Lone Depot Park. Thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it, Alex. Thanks for having me, man.
You got it. Will Sammon on the Alex Garrett Podcast Network.